Imagine a city, not just any city, but the city, the center of the world for 1,000 years. Constantinople, a fortress of civilization filled with golden domes, marble palaces, and unimaginable wealth. Now, imagine the man who rules this city. He is not just a king. He is the emperor of the Romans, God's chosen regent on earth, a figure of almost divine power, and standing guard outside his bedchamber, silent and unmoving, is a 7-foot-tall barbarian from the frozen wastelands of the north, leaning on a battle axe so large it could split a man in two. This is not a fantasy. This is one of the strangest and most successful partnerships in military history. The story of how the most feared raiders of the medieval world, the Vikings, became the most loyal and trusted bodyguards of the Byzantine emperors. This is the story of the Varangian Guard, a brotherhood forged not in a shared culture or a common language, but in a mutual respect for two things: cold, hard steel, and mountains. Our story begins not in the glittering halls of Constantinople, but on the cold, dark rivers of what is now Russia and Ukraine. In the 9th century, Norsemen from Scandinavia, whom the Slavs called the Rus, began to push east. They were not just raiders. They were traders, explorers, and state builders. They carved a great trade route from the Baltic Sea down the Dnieper River to the Black Sea. It was a perilous journey, a river road that led them to the gates of the richest city they had ever dreamed of, Miklagard, the great city, as they called Constantinople. For these men from the north, the city was a revelation, a place of silk, spices, and gold beyond their wildest imaginings. Their first interactions were predictable. They tried to sack it. But the city's legendary walls and its secret weapon, the terrifying Greek fire, proved too much for them. Raiding gave way to trading, and soon these Norsemen, or Varangians as the Greeks called them, became a common sight in the city's markets. The Byzantine emperors, for their part, saw these tall, fierce, and brutally effective warriors not just as traders, but as a potential resource, a weapon to be harnessed. The moment that forged the Guard came in the year 988. The Emperor Basil II was facing a crisis. A massive internal rebellion threatened to tear his empire apart. His own armies were unreliable, filled with nobles who had their own ambitions. And Basil was on the verge of losing his throne. In desperation, he looked north. He sent a message to Vladimir the Great, the Rus Prince of Kiev. The deal was simple. Vladimir would send Basil 6,000 of his best warriors. In return, Basil would give Vladimir something unprecedented, something that would change the course of history, the hand of his own sister, Anna, in marriage. For a barbarian prince to marry a purple-born Byzantine princess was unthinkable. But Basil was desperate. Vladimir agreed. The 6,000 Rus warriors arrived in Constantinople. They were not like the disciplined Roman soldiers. They were a force of raw, untamed power. At the decisive battle, the Varangians smashed the rebel army. The Byzantine historian Michael Psellos wrote of their terrifying ferocity. They are, I believe, a race that has always been axe-bearing, and they serve as guards about the emperor's person. Basil II had found his weapon. He had found his loyal guard. He was so impressed by their skill and their loyalty, a loyalty bought with gold, not political ambition, that he dismissed his unreliable native bodyguards and formally established the Varangian Guard as his personal protectors. What made the Varangian Guard so legendary? It was a combination of three things: their terrifying appearance, their signature weapon, and their absolute, incorruptible loyalty. These were men from a different world. They were, on average, a head taller than the Mediterranean peoples they protected. They wore heavy mail, and their long hair and beards marked them as outsiders, as barbarians. Their presence in the refined, perfumed halls of the great palace was a constant, intimidating reminder of the raw power that served the emperor. Their weapon was the Danish axe, a two-handed behemoth with a long shaft and a massive crescent-shaped blade. In the hands of a powerful Norseman, it could cleave through a shield, a helmet, and the man wearing it in a single blow. They were known as the axe-bearing guards, and the image of them standing silent watch, their great axes gleaming, was enough to quell most thoughts of rebellion. But their most valuable asset was their loyalty. Unlike local guards who could be drawn into political conspiracies, the Varangians were outsiders. Their loyalty was not to a political faction or a noble family. It was to the man who paid them their gold, the emperor, and their loyalty was absolute. They were the emperor's eyes and ears in the city, the guardians of his treasury, and on the battlefield, they were the elite shock troops who would form a wall of steel and fury around. To get to the emperor, you had to go through them, and almost no one ever did. To be a member of the Varangian Guard was to be made for life. The pay was astronomical, far more than any warrior could hope to earn in the cold north. But the real prize came upon the death of an emperor. The Varangians had the ancient right of pillaging the palace. They were allowed to run through the imperial treasury and take whatever they could carry. This tradition made many Varangians fabulously wealthy, and the stories of this wealth traveled back to their homelands, creating a constant stream of new recruits. The most famous of these was a man who would become a legend in his own right. Harald Sigurdsson, later known as Harald Hardrada, the Hard Ruler of Norway. As a young man, he fled his homeland after a failed bid for the throne and traveled to Constantinople to join the Guard. For a decade, he served the empire with distinction, fighting in Sicily, Bulgaria, and the Holy Land. He rose through the ranks, becoming the commander of the Guard, and amassed a personal fortune so vast that he had to ship it back to the north in multiple vessels. He eventually returned to Norway, seized the throne, and in a twist of fate, died in 1206 at the Battle of Stamford Bridge, fighting against the English King Harold Godwinson, just before the Norman conquest. The man who had once guarded one empire died trying to conquer another. His story is the ultimate example of the Varangian dream. For 3 centuries, the Varangian Guard was the anchor of the Byzantine Empire. They were the unmovable object at the center of a world of chaos. They saw emperors come and go, they crushed rebellions, and they defended the city walls against countless enemies. But the empire itself was in a slow, terminal decline. And in the year 1204, the Guard faced its greatest and its final test. The Fourth Crusade, a Christian army that was supposed to be fighting in the Holy Land, was diverted by political intrigue and Venetian greed to the gates of Constantinople itself. For the first time in 900 years, the city was breached. The Crusaders poured into the streets, unleashing a 3-day orgy of destruction, looting, and slaughter. The Varangian Guard, now composed mostly of Englishmen and Danes who had fled the Norman conquest of their own country, made their last stand around the emperor's palace. They fought with their legendary ferocity, but they were hopelessly outnumbered. The empire they had sworn to protect was being torn apart from the inside by its own supposed allies. The city fell. The Byzantine Empire was shattered, and though it would later be partially restored, it would never recover. The Varangian Guard as a formal institution ceased to exist. The Varangian Guard is more than just a footnote in military history. It is a story about the strange and powerful connections that can form between different worlds. It is a story of how loyalty, even a loyalty bought with gold, can become a powerful force for stability in a chaotic world. These men came to Constantinople as mercenaries, as outsiders, as barbarians. But for 300 years they were the heart and soul of an empire's defense. They were the silent, axe-wielding giants who stood watch while a civilization burned brightly, and they were there at the very end to witness its tragic fall. Their story is a testament to the fact that sometimes the most loyal citizen is the one who comes from a world away, a stranger who, for the right price and for the right honor, will adopt your cause as his own and defend it to the very last breath.